Somewhere along the way, you were handed a script. Be kind, be patient, be the bigger person, turn the other cheek, and you followed it, because you were told that that's what decent people do. So you absorbed the tension instead of addressing it. You gave more than you received and called it generosity. You stayed quiet when you should have spoken, and spoke when you should have stayed quiet. You bent, adjusted, and accommodated. And the people around you got so comfortable with your flexibility that they stopped noticing it was costing you anything. Then came the moment. Everything shifted. Maybe it was a betrayal. Maybe it was a slow accumulation of being taken for granted. Maybe it was just waking up one day and realizing that the version of yourself you'd been performing for everyone else's comfort had very little to do with who you actually are. That moment wasn't a breakdown. It was a beginning. The pain cracked something open, and what came through was clarity. You don't need to become cruel. You need to become conscious. You don't owe everyone the same version of you. There's a popular idea that consistency is a virtue, that a person of strong character treats everyone with the same warmth, the same openness, the same level of trust. It sounds noble. It might even be noble, but in a world where not everyone comes to the table with equal intentions, it's also quietly dangerous. When you present the same face to everyone, you hand every person, regardless of who they are or what they want, a map of how you work. They learn what makes you defensive. They learn what makes you generous. They learn exactly which words to use and which moments to choose. And once someone has that map, they don't need to earn your trust. They just need to navigate it. Being honest doesn't mean being an open book. There's a difference between integrity and accessibility. You can be a person of genuine character while still being deliberate about who gets access to which parts of you. That's not deception. That's discernment. The people who command the most respect in any room are rarely the most talkative. They're measured. They reveal what's necessary and keep the rest close, not because they're hiding something, but because they understand that depth is earned, not given away on arrival. Start thinking in layers. Some people belong on the surface. Some people earn their way deeper over time. You decide where the lines are. That's not coldness. That's self-possession. The most powerful response is often no response. Most people are operating on autopilot. Someone pushes, they push back. Someone praises them, they open up. Someone threatens them, they retreat or retaliate. Every trigger has a predictable reaction, and the people around them know exactly which buttons to press. This is not strength. It's a pattern, and patterns can be exploited. The moment you train yourself to pause before responding, not to suppress what you feel, but to choose how and whether to express it, something fundamental changes. You stop being a system that can be operated from the outside. You become harder to read, harder to manage, harder to destabilize. When someone provokes you and you don't react, you haven't lost the exchange. You've won it. Because they made a move expecting a response, and the response never came. That uncertainty, not knowing if they landed the hit, not knowing what you're thinking, not knowing what comes next, costs them far more than any counterattack would. Silence isn't weakness. It's information asymmetry. You know what you're feeling. They don't. That gap is yours to use. The same principle applies to praise. When someone suddenly becomes very warm, very generous, very interested in your success, slow down. Flattery is sometimes genuine. It's also sometimes a setup. Give it time before you give it access. Real intentions sustain themselves. Manipulation usually runs out of patience. And in high-stakes decisions, a significant offer, a heated confrontation, an unexpected ultimatum, the first emotional wave is almost never the right time to respond. Let it pass. A cooler mind makes better calculations, and better calculations lead to moves that actually matter. Watch what people do, not what they say. Words are cheap, not because people are inherently dishonest, but because words cost almost nothing to produce. They require no sacrifice, no consistency, no follow-through. Anyone can say the right things. What separates the people worth trusting from the ones worth watching is what they do when it's inconvenient. When someone tells you they care about you, look at where they put their time. When someone says they'll be there for you, notice where they actually stand when things get difficult. When someone talks about honesty and transparency, pay attention to how they behave when they're under pressure and nobody's watching. This isn't cynicism. It's just pattern recognition. You're not looking for reasons to distrust everyone. You're developing the ability to see clearly. Now, one of the most useful questions you can ask about any relationship, friendship, professional, romantic, is, what does this person actually gain from having me around? That question isn't paranoid. It's clarifying. When you understand what someone is getting from the connection, you understand the connection itself. You know its real shape, its real stability, its real limits. And when someone is working against you, ask the same question in reverse. What are they afraid of losing? Most hostility isn't personal, it's territorial. People protect what they have. If your presence threatens someone's status, visibility, or sense of control, they'll push back. Understanding that doesn't mean you have to accept it. It means you don't waste emotional energy on confusion about why it's happening. Extend this same honesty to yourself. You're not purely altruistic either. You have interests, preferences, things you protect. Admitting that doesn't make you selfish. It makes you self-aware. And self-awareness is the only starting point for actually reading other people accurately. When you stop projecting your own motivations onto everyone else, you start seeing them as they are. The need for approval is a leash. The desire to be liked is not a character flaw. It's human, but when it runs your decisions, when it determines what you say, what you do, what you're willing to risk, it stops being a natural inclination and becomes a control mechanism. You probably already felt this. The sentence you didn't say because you weren't sure how it would land, the boundary you didn't hold because you were worried about the reaction, the direction you didn't pursue because it might have disappointed someone whose opinion you'd been unconsciously prioritizing. Every one of those moments was a small surrender, and they accumulate. The most immediately obvious cost is impact. You can't be visible and universally inoffensive at the same time. People who move things, in rooms, in industries, in relationships, do it by being clear, not by being palatable. Clarity creates friction. Not the destructive kind, but the kind that marks where you actually stand. The less obvious cost is identity. When you spend enough time adjusting yourself to manage other people's comfort, you lose track of what you actually think, what you actually want, what you actually stand for. The center becomes negotiable, and a negotiable center is a fragile one. Here's what nobody tells you about the people who drift away when you stop performing. Their departure is useful information. They weren't responding to you. They were responding to your flexibility. When the flexibility disappears, so do they. That's not a loss, that's a filter. What remains after that clearing is something far more solid. The goal is not to be liked by fewer people, it's to be respected by the right ones. And respect doesn't come from being agreeable, it comes from being legible, from having a consistent center that people can orient around, even if they don't always love what they find. Let your presence speak, not your resume. There's a particular kind of insecurity that presents itself as confidence. It talks loudly about its accomplishments. It works very hard to frame every interaction favorably. It explains, justifies, and volunteers its credentials before anyone asks. The signal it's actually sending is, I'm not sure you can see my value, so let me help you. But here's what happens when you constantly explain your worth. You place the evaluation entirely in the other person's hands. You've invited them to judge, to compare, to decide. You've made yourself the subject of their assessment rather than the person setting the terms. Real confidence doesn't perform. It simply operates. When you have standards, you don't announce them. You apply them. You don't give lengthy explanations for why you won't tolerate something. You just don't tolerate it. People observe the pattern and they adjust accordingly. No speech required. This restraint creates something that announcements never can. Mystery. When you're not broadcasting your every plan, your every achievement, your every insecurity, people become curious. Curiosity creates attention. Sustained attention raises perceived value. And when your perceived value rises, your actual leverage increases. There's also a practical dimension to this in any kind of negotiation. The person who talks the most is usually the person with the most to lose. They fill silence with justifications because silence makes them uncomfortable. The person who's genuinely comfortable with silence, who doesn't feel compelled to close every gap, holds the structural advantage. They have options. Options create patience. Patience creates power. Stop trying to make people understand you. Start focusing on being consistent enough that your behavior becomes its own argument. Over time, one well-placed action communicates more than 100 well-constructed sentences. Protect your energy like the resource it is. There is a version of generosity that quietly destroys you. It says yes to every request, shows up for every crisis, makes itself available to everyone at all times, and then wonders why it feels permanently depleted. You are not an unlimited resource. Your attention, your time, your emotional capacity, these are finite. Every unit you spend is a unit you can't spend elsewhere, and most people, not out of malice but simply out of human nature, will take as much as you make available to them. This is not a reason to become withholding or cold. It's a reason to become selective. There's a meaningful difference between those two things. Coldness pushes everyone away equally. Selectivity means you have a clear sense of where your energy produces something real, and you protect it accordingly. Distance, used well, is one of the most underrated tools available to you. Not the distance of withdrawal or punishment, but the deliberate distance of someone who knows their own value and doesn't give it away indiscriminately. Counterintuitively, maintaining a certain degree of distance often deepens respect rather than diminishing it. What's readily accessible tends to lose its weight. What requires something to reach tends to hold its weight. Pay attention to the patterns in your relationships. Who reciprocates? Who only shows up when they need something? Who is present when it costs them something? And who disappears the moment it does? You don't need to make dramatic decisions based on these observations, but you do need to let them inform how you distribute your investment. The people who deserve your depth will prove it over time. The ones who don't will reveal that too. Your job is simply to notice and to stop pouring into containers that don't hold. Rising is better than revenge. When someone wrongs you, the instinct to retaliate makes complete sense. Anger is clarifying. It tells you that something mattered, that a line was crossed, that you're not going to simply absorb it. There's nothing wrong with that signal. The question is what you do with it. Revenge is expensive, not morally, strategically. It requires you to keep the person who wronged you at the center of your attention, your planning, your emotional life. Every move you make in response to them is a move you're not making for yourself. They've already taken something from you once. Revenge gives them a second opportunity to occupy your bandwidth. The more effective response is one that they feel but can't quite trace. Not a counterattack, a shift in trajectory. You stop engaging with the conflict and start building from where you are, quietly, consistently, without explaining yourself to anyone. As the distance grows, as your position strengthens and your options multiply, something interesting happens. The anger diminishes on its own, not because you've forgiven anything, but because you no longer need anything from them. And when you stop needing something from someone, they lose their power over you entirely. You can't be hurt by someone whose opinion has become irrelevant to your life. The people who once dismissed you start paying attention when your results speak for themselves, not because you demanded it, because results have a way of adjusting perception without asking permission. You don't have to announce the shift. The shift announces itself. The most decisive statement you can make to someone who underestimated you is not a confrontation. It's a level of success they no longer have access to. You don't say a word, your position says everything. They told you to be good because good people are manageable. They told you to be patient because patient people don't ask hard questions. They told you to be understanding because understanding people don't draw lines. You followed the script and now you've seen where it leads. Good isn't enough. Smart is what's required. And smart doesn't mean ruthless. It means clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you'll accept. Clear about where your energy goes and why. The betrayals that broke you were expensive lessons. But they were lessons. You know things now that you didn't know before. You see things you used to miss. You won't fall for the same dynamics twice. That's not bitterness. That's education. Use it.